Namaskar and welcome to our special show. You know that our country has been celebrating the 125th anniversary of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, one of the greatest and most illustrious leaders of India. And it also coincides with the 75th anniversary of the independence of the country. On this occasion, the government of India made very significant announcements that the Republic Day parade would now begin from 23rd January, that is Netaji's birth anniversary, and his statue would be installed at India Gate. Now a hologram has been installed, but it will be replaced by a granite statue, a big size statue. Earlier, the statue of George V was there, but that was removed long back. And to talk about all these things, we have none else than the daughter of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, Anita Bose Pfaff. So, madam, welcome to our show and thank you so much for sparing time. Thank you so much. We are greatly honored and privileged to have you. As I have said that Netaji's statue is being installed, hologram is already there. So, that is the most vantage, most important location in India, and by installing his statue in India Gate, I think now he is on a par with Mahatma Gandhi, and even the Republic Day function begins with 23rd January. So, your comments.
I was very pleased to learn that my father's statue should be installed in such a prominent place. And I think there is a symbolic justice to it as well, that the former colonial ruler of India should be replaced by one of the foremost freedom fighters for India's independence. And as you mentioned, it took some time to remove the statue. And of course, it also took some time to install the statue, or will take some time to install the statue, now a hologram. And I think it is certainly a very appropriate way to honor Netaji on the 125th anniversary of his birth and the 75th anniversary of India's independence.
We Indians are very obsessed with politics. In fact, politics is too much with us. And so there is a lot of politicking also, everyone taking credit that we did this and that's why it was done. But we shall not go into that politics. I would like to hear from you some of the personal things. You had told me in 2003 when we met in Munich and when I was part of Prime Minister Bihari Vajpayee's media delegation, you had come to meet with the husband, Martin Pfaff. And then I remember you had told me that you were 4 weeks old when Netaji had last seen you. So obviously you don't have any memories of your father, but you have heard from your mother, Emily Shankle. Would you like to share some of those stories that your mother narrated to you about Netaji?
I think from the very beginning she was quite in love with him and was quite taken in by his personality. What surprised some people is that she accepted so readily that she always had to play second fiddle, and that from the very beginning he made it very clear that India was his first, second, and third love, and that everything that he did was motivated by his interest in his country. And I think from that point of view, he must have been a very difficult partner. And I'm sure that was not easy, but my mother was a very loyal person. And surprisingly, I must say she never criticized my father.
And as you said that India was his first, second and third love. In fact, he told her that India is my first and last love. And still he loved her and she loved him. Many love letters are in public domain. In 1994, I think, when she announced that it is 60th year when we met Netaji, and now I permit you to make my love letters public.
It was quite interesting that, of course, most of the letters that he wrote to her were subject to censorship when he was in India. either when he was in jail, they contained the stamps censored and passed. And in some of the letters he mentions, keep in mind that even if my letters are not censored officially, my friends watch us. So that it was very difficult sort of to write an open love letter.
But in one letter, I read that he addressed your mother as darling and queen of my heart. But I was surprised that in most of the letters, he was addressing as Miss Shankle. So, was it because there was some fear of espionage or that his letters would be intercepted, so he should not make it very public that she is the wife or beloved? Addressing wife as Miss Shankle, that's not very normal or natural.
Well, if you have all your, if you have to expect that all your mail is censored and read by somebody, you have to be very careful in what you say. And sometimes he would sneak in a few words in German, even expecting that this would sort of pass by the censorship.
They got married in, I think, December 1938, but it was kept a secret for so many years. Would you like to speak about it?
And at one stage, she mentioned to Professor Gordon, who is a biographer of my father and my uncle, that actually it was in 1937, but he must have mistaken something. As far as I always knew, it was they got married in January of 1942.
Your mother disclosed it to Leonard Gordon that she got married, as you correctly said, maybe 1937. I don't know whether he heard it rightly or what was the mistake, I don't know, but that has been recorded by Gordon. And as he was informed by your mother.
Yes, my father unfortunately left us with some mysteries, not only his death, but also, and in his letter to his brother, informing him of his marriage, he does not mention the date, but uh, we are left with this mystery.
No,
But
in one letter to
considering all the facts which we sort of put together also in the context of sort of researching for the book which I'm involved in writing on right now, I'm more inclined to say that they got married in 1942 because um, I don't know why Professor Gordon got things mixed up, but in any case, we are sort of faced with these two dates, and Krishna Bose was more inclined to believe
Gordon's
uh,
date. Yes.
Gordon, but of course she's no longer alive to
Corroborate or
report on
contradict.
that. But in the recent conversation I had with Professor Gordon, I got the impression that he must have picked up something because some of the things could not have happened in 1957.
Anyway, that's not very material, whether it is 37 or 42, that's not very material. But he wrote in a letter to Sharat Chandra Bose that I am married and I have a daughter, please take care. So that is itself a big proof about the marriage and that the daughter was born to him. His death or disappearance is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma, and that enigma continues till date. That even now people talk that Netaji did not die, and if he did not die, then when did he die? It is 125 years. Not normal for any human being to survive so long, even if he didn't die in that plane crash. Three committees and commissions, two confirmed his death. The last one, Mukherjee Commission, said no, he did not die in that plane crash. Shahnawaz Committee, the first that was constituted in 1956, said that he died in the plane crash. What is your view, your opinion?
An investigation was started by the British and the Americans because they were, of course, very interested in what would have or could have happened to him. And these documents were only made public much later. And in fact, a Japanese commission had made their own document available to the Shanavas Commission in 1956, if I remember correctly. And they all came to the same conclusion that he died as a consequence of a plane crash in what is now Taipei, Taiwan, on the 18th of August in the evening or the night of that same day. The Mukherjee Commission, I'm afraid to say, was prepared in a somewhat shoddy way and contains quite a number of inconsistencies. If you consider the report itself and the documents which were put in an annex, the report says some totally different things in part from what the documents say, and unfortunately, most people have not read all the annexes when they went through the report and only referred to that. But I'm quite convinced also as a consequence of being an eyewitness to interviews with survivors of the plane crash that he died in the plane crash in 1945. And of course, there are some minor inconsistencies in the reports. There are two, say, in the eyewitness testimonies on the exact time of day when what happened at the hospital and so on. But there were a number of eyewitnesses. Habibur Rahman was
A
the
co-passenger. He was
officer who
flying with
accompanied my
Netaji.
father and was one of the survivors. And there are a couple of Japanese officers who also survived the plane crash. And of course, there are a number of people who died and whose families and whose country uh, does not doubt that they died. In fact, some of the relatives are somewhat upset when they hear about the controversy taking place in India about his death.
But as you refer to Shahnawaz committee, there are three members in that committee. It was headed by Shahnawaz Khan, but another one was one SL Mitra, ICS officer, and one was one of your uncle, Suresh Chandra
Yes.
Bose. He gave a dissenting note, and not only gave a dissenting note, he said that he was pressurized by other members of the committee and also by Bidhan Chandra Rai, Chief Minister, then Chief Minister, to give a report that Netaji died in the plane crash. And even I have gathered that even Shah Nawaz Khan privately told that I did as I was asked to do. I was asked by the Supreme Leader, whether it was Supreme Leader was Subhas Chandra Bose or Jawaharlal Nehru. Suresh Chandra Bose said that Jawaharlal wanted this report that the committee should confirm that Subhas Chandra Bose died.
I doubt that Shahnawaz Khan would have said something which Netaji did not ask him to say. On the other hand, there were a number of reports by people who had no way of being influenced by Pandit Nehru or by my father, as I referred to the Japanese report and the British ones. And my uncle, of course, interestingly enough, had first initialed as agreeing to the report, which was handed in as the major report, and he then presented a dissenting report. So there is another theory which one might have, that somebody tried to persuade him after he had initialed the report to present a dissenting report for a variety of interests that may have been there with some people who had a personal interest in keeping up the story that my father was alive.
No, but Mukherjee Commission has said that there should be DNA test. Are you Are you prepared
Yeah,
for it?
and
Do you
I
think?
hope that this will be done. Now is that the technology of DNA testing has been advancing during the last 15, 20 years. And so I think we should have a better chance of getting the main issue is that it was uncertain whether DNA could be extracted from the charred remains of my father, because people had been talking about the ashes, but it's not only ashes.
It
There
is
are
also
bones
bones.
also and teeth in the remains which still are there but are charred, and so it remains to be seen whether it's possible to extract DNA from that. But I think the chances are better now than they would have been
So
uh,
you are
20
prepared
years
for
ago.
DNA test. You want that DNA test should be conducted.
I have been in favor of conducting a DNA test for quite a number of years now, for the simple reason that I hoped that at least the rational people who had their doubts would accept the outcome of it, whatever it may be. I'm convinced it will turn out that if it can be tested, that these are his remains. And if that is so, I imagine the rational people who believe in scientific evidence would believe that.
Surprisingly, Mukherjee Commission says that the ashes that are there in the Renkoji temple, they belong to one Ichira Okura. I don't know what is the basis of saying that, but that is what the commission says.
There was some argument about death certificate getting lost, and but the
No, no,
doctor
no
who
death
had
certificate was
issued the
issued.
death
In fact,
certificate
not lost.
stated in an interview that he had issued a death certificate, but he did not know what happened to it. Of course, this doctor, I think, must be dead by now, because he would be well over 90. And but a few years ago, he was still alive, and over and over in different contexts, he had been interviewed and stated that. So. Of course, the DNA test, which hopefully can be done, should provide some
So
scientific
that will be a
evidence
clinching evidence whether it was
if DNA can be
Netaji's
extracted.
death or somebody else's death. Because when Mukherjee Commission's report was placed in Parliament, then UPA government trashed it. It is rubbish. And in fact, two union ministers who were from West Bengal, they were batting for the government. Why did it reject the Mukherjee Commission's report? Maybe they were specifically chosen because they belong to West Bengal. So, if something pertains to Netaji, it should be someone from Bengal who should take a stand. And these two ministers had taken a stand that it is not tenable. And when the opposition, then BJP was in the opposition, and when they countered, then they said that why did our Atal Bihari Vajpayee go to Renkoji temple to pay tribute if he believed that Netaji was not dead? So these controversies are still raised. I don't know what is the solution, final solution. But I have also read that your mother did not accept the theory either that he died in the plane crash.
My mother got the news of my father's death via radio. She was listening to the news, and it was announced that he had been killed in a plane crash. And that was a few days after the crash took place. And she believed in this for a long time. But then, when she came to meet my uncle Sharat, he wrote, said, I do not have any evidence. It's just a feeling that my brother is still alive. And this sort of uh, brought up her hope that he might have survived. But she also didn't know anything, of course, and she could only go by even less evidence of what is available today. My uncle had no first-hand evidence either. He got the news of his brother's death when he was in jail, but these two brothers were so close to each other that I think he just couldn't stand the idea of his brother being dead. for my uncle, it was this hope that his brother might be alive.
You visited India for the first time, I think, in 1959, and you visited different cities. And Krishna Bose has written that you ad- adopted and rather adapted to the Indian culture so beautifully, touching everyone's feet, elders' feet, and it did not appear that you are coming from a different country. So you adapted completely to the Bengali culture. Would you like to reminisce those days?
I came to India in 1960 and stayed for the main part with my relatives. And they also took me around to see different parts of the country. It was a very moving experience. Maybe the most moving meeting which I recall was with Bashanta Devi, the widow of C.R. Das, who was called Takuma by the my generation of the Bose family. And when we met, it was really a very moving experience on the part of both of us. And to visit many of the sites which I had heard about, and to meet many of the people who knew my father intimately was a very important experience for me.
Your mother was initially opposed to your visit to India because she felt that when you see that people have so much of reverence for your father, it may go into your head. So Anita should not have this kind of experience.
My mother, as I mentioned before, was very tolerant towards my father and quite willing to accept the fact that she always had to play second fiddle. And I think maybe as a consequence of that, she sort of showered all her love and jealousy on me. And I think she was also afraid of losing me in the process. And in fact, when I had decided after coming back that I would eventually want to go to India again and live there, she was quite upset about this. And of course, she was also a person who had always sort of instilled on me the idea that your father was a great man, but that doesn't make you a great anything. If anything, it imposes an obligation on you to do your best and to live up to a great image. And don't you get any ideas that you are an important person yourself.
Maybe you call it patriarchy, but generally, children settle down in the country of their father. And so it was expected that you may like to come down to India and settle here, and you could have joined politics, or not. If not politics, you could have done something else. But being Netaji's daughter and living in India would have meant a lot of things to you, an entirely different world.
It was important for me to be myself and not just live on the reflected glory of my father. And as it turned out, I had intended to go to India, but eventually I did not go because I met my husband in India and he was European. And then we lived in the United States for several years after we got married, and later on moved to Germany because he wanted to uh, make his life in a united Europe. And to some extent, of course, this allowed me to be myself, to live my own life, and not be pressured into just being my father's daughter.
His patriotism, his nationalism was so intense, the fire of nationalism was so intense that he could not distinguish in his collaboration with good and bad, in collaborating with Nazi Germany or imperial thugs of Japan. Obviously, that was patriotism, but a question is raised. Would you like to answer this?
If you read about what his ideas were and what his motivation was, you can certainly make out that he was not a fascist, and he did not really have great affection for Nazi ideology. But if you consider the situation historically, uh, in the 1930s, he was involved in Congress politics. He became Congress president twice. He was more or less forced to resign by Gandhi and his conservative Congress followers. And but he was convinced, other than Mahatma Gandhi, whom he admired greatly, by the way. It was Netaji who called
Called him
Mahatma
father of the
Gandhi
nation.
father of our nation. But my father was convinced that non-violence alone would not gain India her independence, that if need be, arms had to be taken up to fight for independence. His slogan was, "Give me blood and I will give you freedom." My father wanted to fight Britain to gain India's independence from Britain. So where can you turn? So there were not too many countries left, and they were all, ideologically speaking, not a great choice. One was Nazi Germany. Italy was a fascist country. Japan was a fascist country, you might say. And there was the Soviet Union, who was not a great democracy either. So the Soviet Union was an option in any case. Netaji's first attempt to contact a foreign country to support India after he had escaped from India was his attempt to contact the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union did not show any inclination to support him other than to allow him to pass through the country. So he really was not left with too many choices where to seek support against uh, Britain. Certainly, the United States would not have supported him at the time. The other European countries wouldn't have either, because they had already entered the war on the side of Britain, France, for example. So the choice was not great.
Yeah, you
Either
are
he
right.
could
You are
have
right.
he was aware that the Nazi regime was a very negative one, and already in the 30s he had sort of tried to uh, intervene on with the Nazi government with regard to the treatment of Indians, but the choice was not great where to turn to.
You are very right. Choice was quite limited, and also that Netaji felt that an army had to be raised. He said that Washington had an army, Garibaldi had an army, and how can we drive the British out without having an army? So we had a long chat. Thank you so much for speaking to Doordarshan. Namaskar, Pranam, and we shall meet again. Thank you so much.
Namaskar and Jai Hind.
Jai Hind, Jai Hind.